And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the real news. Here's Farron.
Hello and welcome to the Real News, our last broadcast in 2008. It has been our goal not only to report the news and information, but also to bring very interesting guests to our local radio station for our listeners. And to me, even more importantly, to give the listeners a forum to call in and voice their opinions on the news of the week. With that in mind, I think we had a very interesting first year on WSIC and WDSL. I would also like to comment on how rapidly the events have transpired in the last 2 months with respect to our collapsing economy. We were told mere months ago by Mr. Bush, Mr. McCain, Mr. Obama, Paulson, and Bernanke that our economy was sound, even that the worst was over. So I think a local radio broadcast that exposes the lies of the government and the media is extremely important in these trying times. Also, I want to thank everyone that got involved this year, from our sponsors, Al, Mr. Sharp, people who called in, those who emailed, the station owners, Mark and Billy, for taking a chance on the broadcast, and of course my right-hand man, Brian, Jim, our cameraman, Ty, Devin, Jennifer, and members of We Are Change North Carolina. I'm looking forward to a very interesting year next year. I don't think there will be any shortage of material. So before we go to our guest, Jason Bermas, producer of the film Loose Change, most watched documentary in the history of the internet, and creator of his new film, Fabled Enemies. Brian, I wanted to ask you, what was your take on this year? Anything stand out as far as a favorite or special event to you? And would you like to also comment on our guest, Jason Bermas, for our last broadcast in 2008?
Yes, Farron, it's been an extraordinary year. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank WSIC for this opportunity, Billy Buck and Mark Singer. Yes, it's been an extraordinary year. I mean, it's been riddled by amazing events for us. We've had extraordinary guests on here. I mean, I can't even think of all of them. Judge Napolitano, of course, David Walker. We've had Virginia Fox here in the studio with us. And of course, we attended the Bilderberg conference this past summer, which was an amazing event. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it.
To me, that was the best event of the year. I mean, we were at the tax protest April 15th in Washington, enjoyed that, but to be at the secretive Bilderberg event and see what actually transpired, of course, with Alex Jones and Luke, it was just extraordinary for me.
Absolutely, and you know, we saw Condoleezza Rice, Robert Gates, David Rockefeller was there. We saw Ben Bernanke come in. Jim got some footage of Madeleine Albright driving herself in. Of course, absolutely no mainstream media coverage whatsoever. Approximately 125 of the world's most elite, the elite of the elite, converging in one location in secret for a conference, and nothing on mainstream media whatsoever.
And it kind of leads us up to our last guest of the year, which to me personally, Jason Bermas, that's huge, because anyone that's watched the documentaries, which is actually 3 documentaries, Loose Change, they're all available on Google Videos, and then his latest video, Fabled Enemies, and just his story in general and what he's done for the whole truth movement, just a great way to end the year.
Absolutely, and I mean, one could even argue single-handedly he's done more to promote what actually occurred on 9/11 than any other human being alive, possibly.
Yes, it's an honor to have him with us, and we're going to go ahead and take a break and come back with our guest, and then after our guest, it's going to be a little bit longer interview than normal, but after our guest, as usual, we'll do the news and take our phone calls. So we'll go to the break here on WSIC 1400, WDSL 1520. Hi, Mr. Bermas. We're honored to have you join us here on The Real News. How you doing today, sir? We have stated for our listeners that you were one of the creators of the famous documentary Loose Change, the most watched documentary online, and more recently you wrote and directed a new film, Fabled Enemies, which I really enjoyed and highly recommend. I wanted to start by asking you, when did you start to question the events of 9/11? Was it immediately afterwards, or moreover, what inspired you and Dylan Avery to make the film Loose Change?
Well, immediately afterwards, you know, just like most people, I thought it's the official version. You know, I'm a New Yorker. You know, the last thing on my mind was that my government might have something to do with it. it wasn't really until about 6 months after 9/11 when we had already been in Afghanistan, and now we were really talking about going into Iraq, and the rhetoric and the propaganda just got so thick that basically I started doubting what, the news was telling me. And what really set me off into looking into 9/11 was I happened to be at my old high school, which was about an hour away, and for a men's night basketball game with some of my old friends and teachers. And in my old locker room, there was a picture of Osama bin Laden in the urinal, and it was Operation Enduring Freedom. So basically in a school for 12 to 18-year-olds, they had people peeing on bin Laden's face, and something just clicked in my brain that said, you better make sure that this is the guy that's responsible, because this is the biggest piece of propaganda you've ever seen in your life. I went home that night and I found a website called www.911timeline.net, and this is just a 40-page synopsis from 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. on 9/11, and there were just so many anomalies and things that I had no idea had occurred that it really just set me off and started me on this journey to looking into 9/11.
Jason, good morning. This is Brian.
Hey, how you doing?
Great, sir. How are you?
Good.
Well, I just first want to take this opportunity to say you are a true patriot, and it is a great honor to have you on here with us today, sir.
Oh, thank you, man.
Oh, you're welcome. I'd like for you to briefly go into the story of Barry Jennings of the City Housing Authority. I believe you had originally left, upon his request, his interview out of Loose Change Final Cut, and of course the events surrounding his mysterious death. If you could just go into his incredible story for our listeners today, sir.
Sure. Well, for those that don't know, there was a third building on 9/11 that fell into its own footprint at free fall speed. It was a 47-story skyscraper known as World Trade Center Building 7. Now, World Trade Center Building 7 also happened to be New York City's #1 spook house. And what do I mean by that? Well, this thing contains the largest CIA office outside of Langley, Virginia. It has the largest Secret Service office in the world. It has the IRS, the Secret Service, the SEC, and the Office of Emergency Management on the 23rd floor, in which all local government was supposed to go in the case of an emergency. So, Mr. Jennings, who is a housing authority worker, gets a call early in the morning after the first plane hits, and is told to go there, and he goes there not thinking much. He arrives, and another gentleman, Michael Hess, who at the time was the City Corporation Counsel, decided they're going to go up, but they can't, because it seems like the elevators are shut off. They need a police escort. They get up into the 23rd floor, and nobody's there. It's abandoned. And this is very shocking for both Mr. Jennings and Mr. Hess. Mr. Hess was really there to find Rudy Giuliani, who was supposedly in World Trade Center 7 earlier that day. So when they get in there and they realize there's no power on, there's no one listening to them, they can't get down the elevators, they finally find a door, and they start to take the stairs down. And they get from the 23rd floor to about the 8th floor. Now this is before either tower has collapsed, and they witness a huge explosion from underneath them. Now both of them went on the news that day, talked about it, different networks. It was pretty unbelievable. They were eventually rescued. I mean, Barry Jennings almost brought to tears. Actually, it is brought to tears on live television that day. So, for years, no one really knows this story. Even Dylan and myself, we hadn't put all the pieces together. We looked at a lot of footage. We didn't really realize that Jennings had been in Building 7. It wasn't until we came across the Michael Hess news clip that we realized this. So we found out his information, and I think it was 2 summers ago. We called him up and we interviewed him. And he told us an incredible story. I mean, he told us pretty much what I just told you guys. And I put it in my last film, Stable Enemies, because when we first